Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much to Cathy and Sarah for joining me on our chat about working from home. This is a Sapphire conversation, and I'm really grateful to have Cathy from Sapphire to talk to us, and Sarah from Kingswood Group to give us some of the sort of what's going on in the market about this working from home, working in the office, hybrid solutions, what trends are happening and what you're both finding in your own environment. So Cathy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Cathy. I'm a director at Sapphire Group of Companies, and we're very interested in this conversation because that's what we're all about.
Sarah.
Hi there. So yes, I'm Sarah. I'm the managing director of Kingswood Group. We are a HR and recruitment solutions business based in the UK.
Fabulous. So just so the people listening get a bit of context, Sapphire Group are a company that was founded in COVID times, in the online rush, and has done incredibly well through that period, growing at a rate of knots. And Cathy set about doing an employee satisfaction survey about their working structure. And I think what's really interesting, or what's really struck me coming out of the survey, is this is a global thing, and there are so many different types of people, different types of roles that have very different viewpoints on this phenomena, shall we call it. So I don't know if Cathy, if you want to talk to us a little bit about that survey, why you did it, and the sort of information that came out of it, what your staff are saying.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, Sapphire was founded during the COVID era as such, and it was more by fluke than on purpose that we became a virtual company. We had no offices, we had no need for offices as COVID progressed. We were able to implement our systems and procedures around a virtual situation. And so as the COVID era has come to an end, it just seemed a logical path for us to proceed along these lines. And many of the people who had become part of Sapphire were flexible, were used to the environment. We'd already put in procedures and processes that catered for a virtual company. So as we saw it, it was no choice but to go ahead with this, because why would we want to go back to something where all the companies in the market were rushing back? Do I go to the office? Do I work from a hybrid situation? What do we do? Oh, we didn't even think about that. We just continued. And so it was probably easier for us than most of the companies out there. We chose to do a survey amongst our current staff members because we just wanted to know that we were on the right track. And certainly the pros that came out of the survey, some of them very obvious, some of them not so obvious. There was, of course, the stress and the travel, commuting, the cost of travel, the extra productivity that staff seem to think that they have because they weren't traveling and they were at their home environments in a comfortable, flexible environment. One of the other major aspects is reducing our carbon footprint. So we feel we're doing a little bit for the climate environment as well.
I have a question for you, Cathy. Sorry, it's just struck me. And Sarah, this might be a question for you as well. Personally, you've both experienced pre-COVID working situations, whether or not in your own businesses. And you just said something there that struck me as staff, their perceived additional productivity. I wonder what your perspective of that is, whether you perceive the same productivity within your own businesses, but when you're contrasting against pre-COVID, possibly other businesses. Does that make sense?
We started about a year and a half before COVID, actually. So we did have some experience of being in the office together, but even then we were operating on a hybrid basis, so we weren't fully 100% in the office as a team. We try to have a diverse workforce, but actually my team, we are mostly parents and women, and even if we haven't got real children, we have fur babies that we have to look after. So actually, having experienced working in a hybrid and flexible space before COVID anyway, we made quite a quick transition online. I feel that we actually work better. We are more productive as a team. Some of the stats that have come out from various surveys have found that people are working longer hours actually in fully remote roles, and even in hybrid roles they're working longer hours on the days that they're working from home. Whether that is actually more productive or not is another question, because there's, you can still sit in front of the computer, but I do find that for certain parts of your role you are more productive in a more solitary environment.
I think that's really interesting. It reflects my sort of findings for my own working styles. What about you, Cathy?
I think what has come out from myself or from my colleagues, but what I've noticed is that the flexibility is more important. And as Sarah mentioned, we have a lot of women with young children working within our environment. The flexibility of being able to attend issues that relate to their children, doctor's appointments, whatever is needed. We don't have that need of someone to sit at a desk. We prefer to be able to measure their productivity with regard to outcomes. And that flexibility, I think, in itself allows a motivated, disciplined individual to work around this and to be able to be more productive within their own timescales, within their balanced environment. And that work-home balance you get from working in a virtual environment is in itself a major highlight to most employees.
I have an interesting anecdote of something I noticed the other day. So I go to a gym, and it's got a sort of restaurant cafe area as well as a working space. And I got out of the jacuzzi because I was pampering myself. And as I was walking in, a guy came out in swim shorts on the phone. And he was literally doing a business deal, wandering around the swimming pool in his swim shorts. And I thought, that's hilarious, firstly. Secondly, you could tell that he was focused, he was engaged, but he's obviously working around his own sort of life schedule. And there was a bit of me going, are you really working? And then there was another part of me going, look, he's literally closing a deal in front of me in his swim shorts by a poolside. And I think COVID's done incredible things in that kind of environment.
Most certainly, and there's no doubt with the remote working, Gary and I within Sapphire UK have been able to establish a remote working from anywhere in the world. Wherever we travel, we are able to work, and we allow for our staff to do the same thing. So the danger, of course, is one of what may be a con we have to highlight at the end of the day, because there were very few cons that came out of our survey, in that staff do tend to work longer hours. They do tend to work more, possibly, hours, and don't necessarily take a organized leave or structured leave. And that's something we need to concentrate on. Some of the other cons that may be highlighted would have been for your graduates, your trainees. That is always going to be an issue, and within our environment it's not an issue at the moment, but it will be something we will have to deal with. And I'll be interested to hear Sarah's commentary on this, because it is something we would need to address over and above one of the more immediate ones, and that is collaboration of staff. It's that team get together, that social interaction. We do have something in place at the moment on a monthly basis where our staff get together. But this survey in itself has highlighted something that we will need to take up a few desks in our office, just so that we can have those collaborative meetings every now and again, those face-to-face establishments of social interaction and relationships. That has not gone by the wayside. There is always going to be a need for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the key things that's come out of a lot of recent surveys is the younger generation who are entering their, the beginning of their careers, and where we have traditionally had, an environment where people learn through passive learning, sitting next to each other, listening to conversations, on the job training. Ultimately, we have found that people entering new careers, not necessarily young people actually, I'll be clear on that, you know, changing careers or learning something new, the focus on how to support those people is one which people are trying lots of different things at the moment. It's great that, you know, we have Zoom and we have, you know, online virtual meeting rooms that we can jump on. But as we know, even in this scenario right now, you can't talk over each other. Not that you do, but it just kind of, you lose that kind of flow of conversation and things. So there's lots being done at the moment to kind of try and be creative. There's a big focus on trying to understand different ways of helping people learn in a virtual environment. And I think we'll see some more development on that. But I think there was something like, I saw a stat earlier of something like 81% of younger people feel isolated by not being in the office. And I think we all know from our earlier careers how much fun it was, you know, going into the office and the social aspects as much as the work bit. So
I wonder if there's a balance here, because the way we've gone to flexible working has hugely enabled movement in the sort of, you know, the gender space. So that there is so much talent that comes from working parents who are not able to you know, reach where they want to be because the children have to come first. And this has enabled that in many, many ways, but it's almost now a detriment to those just arriving into their career. And there's a real balance there. It's interesting to see how the next few years are going to play out in that. And Cathy, as you guys are growing, and actually Sarah, your business as well is growing hugely, that's a really interesting dynamic. I'm interested in, Cathy, you're already thinking about the hybrid style solutions. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there?
This has primarily came out of the need for staff to have one-on-one interactions. We've already had a benefit on a virtual environment in development of staff, I might add. So where we've had specific individual interactions on a Teams meeting, I think it's enabled people to gain far more knowledge than sometimes they would have in a more open environment with a number of people, because they're able to ask that senior mentor staff member the questions they need one-on-one, and they don't feel silly in a bigger environment or whatever, not knowing the answer or whatever. So whilst I understand that the graduate trainee situation is a challenge, the more experienced, established person is able to still develop within this environment. But it doesn't account for what we've just mentioned and Sarah mentioned now, that to have that interaction that we all remember within the staff environment in the office, where it's that interaction, that bit of banter, that just social interaction. And as a result, we do feel that there is a need. And like I said, we've taken up some desks within an office environment. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be a set hybrid situation, but a more flexible one that we would possibly look at putting into place.
I think flexibility is key, not just in the working environment, but if you look at most of the trends, social trends, working trends, life trends, flexibility is really critical, and I think that's probably the focus for most of this kind of decision making process when you're looking at making these strategic decisions. Sarah, have you got anything you want to add into this in terms of workforce diversity, what sort of things you're seeing across, you work along multiple sectors, so what are you seeing?
So again, just from doing a bit of research pre this, one thing I've seen is there's some comments that actually this is helping parents, not just women, who do have children and have had to make decisions to either step back or reduce their hours, and have found in the past that this has then potentially damaged their career progression. Actually, this has helped level up that a little bit more. And we're not just talking about men and women here, we're also talking about people with disabilities, enabling people who perhaps aren't able to get into an office environment or to travel far, or whatever it is, through different disabilities, whether they're mental or physical. That's enabled other people to be able to enter into the workforce as well. So I think from a diversity and inclusion and equality perspective, the pandemic has in a way through the way of working, changes into virtually really enable businesses to benefit from having a more diverse workforce as well, which, I mean, there's lots of benefits from having a diverse workforce. That's another conversation entirely. But I think in a way the virtual remote working has allowed people to have more access.
I wonder if over time they'll become an issue with age. So let me explain that more articulately. One of the things, the social interaction is critical, and the passive learning is critical, and I think you can do an awful lot of it over time. But I've also seen a few articles around social interaction being so critical in making a choice for those graduates coming out of university that they're looking for the office environment type places, and I wonder if that might, become a skew or a problem in the future. What do you think?
I think organisations just have to be aware of who they're targeting at bringing into the business, and I think what Catherine's done there is asked the workforce and assessed the needs of the business, but also spoken to her workforce and said, okay, what's working, what's not working, and it's all about communication, and this is where personally and professionally, communication is the key. If you're not talking to people, if you're not listening, if you're not, taking in that feedback and thinking about it all the time, you're not gonna move forward, and your competitors will be ahead of you. So I think from a entry into the world of working with younger people, not all of them will want social interaction, but you've got to speak to them, and actually that's where it probably comes down to more around your recruitment and your recruitment and attraction strategy, understanding your roles, understanding the target market, and then being able to assess early on whether those people are right for your business.
And that brings us really nicely to, I think, a really important point of culture. So what I've been really struck with during the time that we've been working with Sapphire is how very defined and open the culture is. There's been a decision very early on which runs through the entire business, and you get the vibe when you're talking, to you, Cathy, to Gary, learning how your business works, and culture is really critical. Do you want to talk us through how you've arrived at where you are, whether there were some strategic decisions, whether it was sort of evolved?
I think, Sarah, it has just evolved, and the culture is basically the way that Sapphire Group of companies are set up is very flat structure. So, the interaction with the CEO, Gary, at Sapphire, myself as a director, or whatever, is very flat. So we don't have that whole hierarchy issues to deal with. And maybe that is why we have a very relaxed, interactive culture. And because it's mainly virtual, most of us don't really get too dressed up to go on to a Teams meet or whatever, or certainly the top half is presentable, put it that way. But people are more relaxed because they feel more relaxed, because they're in a comfortable environment. So you do get those interactions and that culture that builds, I think. And maybe because we've never known anything else at Sapphire, that is maybe why it is the way it is. So that's really all I can comment on.
I think one of your key drivers, which has been played out through your lifespan, is the type of people that you are attracting to the business, being very well experienced, known individuals, and I think culture plays into that, and you guys have got it spot on. Sarah, what are you seeing in sort of the general corporate world about this shift in culture, which I think is very linked with working from home, but perhaps in some industries it's lagging behind, in others it's at the forefront. What sort of things are you seeing?
So culture is and has been one of the biggest things for businesses and HR companies and leaders to work on, and it never you can't change culture overnight, and so I think for organisations, I mean industry wise it's very different from a professional services perspective, where most of our roles can be carried out online or on the phone, or it's very much then trying to understand what the business wants to create, and I think creating a culture comes from the business plan, and then that filters through into the people strategy, IT strategy, finance strategy, and everything has to build around it. So culture it works in two ways. You have it from the leadership. The leadership need to understand, what they want in their business, how they want to be seen externally and internally. And then it has to come from the bottom up as well. And people have to live that culture. So if an organisation wants to create an innovative, creative culture that looks after its people, then every decision and activity, internally and externally, has to reflect that. And something we've been focused really on at Kingswood Group as well is re-evaluating our values and understanding how we want to be seen as an employer externally, and every decision we're making now takes that into account. So culture isn't something that can just happen. It's all encompassing. You have to live it and breathe it, and everybody has to be on board with it. And again, that comes down to communication.
I think there's some really interesting things happening in the insurance world relatively recently. There's some high profile conversations going on around gender, diversity. There's been some there's been quite a lot, which I'm sure you'll know about, and how this all plays into the company culture, the working from home, the ultimate strategy, I find really fascinating. I think Sapphire have got it absolutely right, having done the work that we've done with you, and it's really interesting to watch. Again, Sarah, we've known you for quite a long time as well and watched your business grow, and I remember having a meeting with you before we both launched, and I remember being really struck and impressed by your vision. So hugely successful ladies, very grateful to know you both. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say before we sign off? Cathy?
No, it's just been wonderful talking to you ladies. It's lovely to see so intelligent, elegant, powerful ladies within the industries that we sort of knock heads with and or collaborate with as such. So great speaking to you all.
Thank you. Sarah, anything you'd like to add?
Just to say thanks for inviting me in, really. It's lovely to meet Cathy and hear more about Sapphire and all the great stuff they're doing. Very much a market leader and thought leader, I think, in your space. So yeah, I look forward to seeing how you progress.